We continue the Shir Arizal. Till now we have learned the Sefer Shvochei HaRan, which dealt with the life of Rabbi Arizal, and then the story of Rabbi Arizal's Nesiah, his journey to Eretz Yisrael. Before we start the next Sefer, called Sichos HaRan, or the sayings, the wisdom of Rabbi Arizal, I believe that it's very appropriate, having discussed the story of Rabbi Arizal's trip to Eretz Yisrael in such detail, it is only fitting that we now take up a sequel to that story, rather than save it for a much later date. Sequel to the story of Rabbi Arizal's journey to Eretz Yisrael is the story of Rabbi Arizal's Talmud Muvhak, Rabbi Arizal's main Talmud, Rav Nosson, and his trip to Eretz Yisrael, which paralleled Rabbi Arizal's trip in many respects. It is different, of course, too, in many respects, but it is also a fascinating story of adventures that could not be conceived of today. Again, we must first make clear who Rav Nosson was. Nosson was Rabbi Arizal's best top student. Rabbi Arizal himself testified that if not for Rav Nosson, there'd be no trace of Rabbi Arizal's sayings or writings today. So actually, we have Rabbi Nosson to thank for the fact that we are Mekushar attached to Rabbi Arizal. The fact that we have Rabbi Arizal's writings, his Sforim, the fact that Nosson wrote so many Sforim too, and elaborating on Rabbi Arizal's sayings. Nosson wrote the Likutei Tfilos, one of the greatest Sforim that exist, a Sefer of Tfilos, prayers to Hashem, that literally open a person's heart to bring into it a deep sensation, feeling, where the heart pours out by itself words to Hashem. It softens a person's heart, even if the heart is made of stone, turns into a heart of soft flesh, leiv basar, which means Breslov. That helps the person to come close to Hashem, because there's nothing that brings a person closer than tefillah. Rav Nosson was the Skadev to Rabbi Arizal for a period of 9 years. And this too is similar to the case of Reb Chaim Vital, who was the Talmud Muvhak of the Ariyah Kodesh, Arizal, also for about the same period of time. Now, we come to this point where Rav Nosson felt a very strong cheshik, a deep craving to fulfill the words of his Rebbe, words of Rabbi Arizal, in reference to the kedusha, extreme kedusha that a person can achieve by going to Eretz Yisrael. There was no one that took the words of Rabbi Arizal as much to heart as Rav Nosson. Nosson, who though he was probably the greatest goin, greatest Talmudic genius in his time, still felt that he knew nothing whatsoever. He discarded every drop of wisdom that he had, and said he will contain in his mind only that which receives from Rabbi Arizal. That's the only chachma he deems worthy. Doesn't mean, of course, that he forgot Shas. Naturally, it means that he felt for himself that he knew nothing whatsoever. He was like the moon, literally. Greatness in his case was that he felt like the moon, which has no light whatsoever of its own, except that which it receives from its mentor, the sun. This is the case of Rav Nosson. So surely, Rav Nosson felt this much more strongly, the importance of achieving the accomplishment of being in Eretz Yisrael. So he wanted this more than anything else. The question is that if he was with Rabbi Arizal for a period of 9 years, and this was after Rabbi Arizal came back from Eretz Yisrael, and having heard so many statements by Rabbi Arizal about the vital importance of going to Eretz Yisrael, how come then that Nosson never went to Eretz Yisrael during those 9 years? You say, fulfill the words of the tzadik emes. Well, and go to Eretz Yisrael. Why in those 9 years did he not go to Eretz Yisrael? At the time when many others did. And who else would be the one to fulfill this command, this advice to the Nosson? The answer is a very clear one. The answer is that Rav Nosson felt a trip to Eretz Yisrael, the distance was such that today, going from the southern part of Russia to Eretz Yisrael by plane would take under 4 hours. Take less than 4 hours. The trip in those days, round trip, would be as much as close to a year. This meant that he would have to leave Rabbeinu Zal's presence and be away from Rabbeinu Zal for close to a year's time. Moshe Zal felt this was too great a price to pay, even for the sake of being in Eretz Yisrael. So highly did he regard every moment that he stayed with Rabbeinu Zal, that he felt he could not leave Rabbeinu Zal's side. Now the question would arise in a person's mind, how could he, not of course questioning Moshe Zal's wisdom in making a decision like this, at least to ask why. Why would he make a decision like that? Why would he feel that Rabbeinu Zal's closeness was better for that year than being in Eretz Yisrael, since Eretz Yisrael meant achieving the top? Or what would be his origin? Where would he derive it from? The answer is, the Gemara says that the greatest Talmud Chacham next to Moshe Rabbeinu was Ezra HaSefer. Ezra HaSefer, who gave us a lot of our laws as far as the Torah is concerned. Ezra HaSefer, who the Gemara says was so great that Hashem would have given the Torah through Ezra HaSefer, if not for Moshe Rabbeinu. Next to Moshe Rabbeinu. Ezra HaSefer, who was the one that brought the Jews out of Golus, Babylon, back to Eretz Yisrael, there to build the second Beis HaMikdash. He was the leader of the Jews at the time of the rebuilding of the second Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, the second Beis HaMikdash is called the Temple Beis HaMikdash of Ezra HaSefer. Now, you would say then that Ezra HaSefer will be the first one to return to Eretz Yisrael after the Golus. He's the one that's instrumental, the leader, in bringing the Jews out of Golus, going to Eretz Yisrael, building the Beis HaMikdash. Could you ask for a bigger mitzvah than that? Kibbutz Goliath, take the Jews out of Golus, return to Eretz Yisrael, build the Beis HaMikdash. Imagine the greatness of that mitzvah. The Gemara says Ezra HaSefer did not go to Eretz Yisrael. He sent the others. He remained behind in Golus. Why? Because he had a Rebbe whose name was Baruch ben Neriah. He said, as long as my Rebbe is alive, I will not leave his side. This is more important. Hence, we can clearly see of Moshe Zal's reasoning. We do not need proof for his reasoning. But we note, though, the Gemara does say, give a parallel case. And so, during Rabbeinu Zal's lifetime, Moshe Zal did not go to Eretz Yisrael, did not leave Rabbeinu Zal for that period of time, except, of course, there was a time when he was at a distance against his own will. Rabbeinu Zal himself left for a certain city for a cure. There were reasons then, too, where he was fulfilling missions by Rabbeinu Zal. During all this time, Moshe Zal kept on strengthening himself, sharpening his will, his desire to get to Eretz Yisrael. Imagine a person whose heart and mind craves the privilege of experiencing walking on the soil of Eretz Yisrael. Now, after Rabbeinu Zal's Estalkus, Moshe Zal immediately thought it over in his mind, he considered this, and he felt that the best plan would be now not to go to Eretz Yisrael, but to move there permanently. Why not live there? As far as Parnasa, a livelihood is concerned, he could find a means to provide for himself. Wouldn't it be best to go there, not to walk 4 steps, but to every single day breathe the air, walk on the soil, live and become a part of Eretz Yisrael, and eventually pass away there, be buried in Eretz Yisrael? As you mentioned many times, the importance of being buried in Eretz Yisrael is so great that people who die outside of Eretz Yisrael request they be shipped to Eretz Yisrael, which of course is not too advisable in all cases, because the Torah says a person who is evil is shipped to Eretz Yisrael, buried there, the earth itself spits out that body. We don't see it physically, but the earth refuses to accept this body for burial. So, of course, what happens in the spiritual sense is that the body is not considered buried there. However, a person who does deserve it, does merit this Sichos, tries to see that he is buried there, though he passes away outside of Eretz Yisrael. But surely it is much better a person gives forth releases his soul in his mother's arms. The mother is the land of Eretz Yisrael. The importance of being buried there is simply because the Torah says that a person, when he passes away, returns to dust. He returns to the dirt in which he is buried. The soil of Eretz Yisrael is Kodesh, it is holy. So a person becomes part of that dust, that soil, his physical being, the remains become holy as part of that soil. A person buried in Eretz Ha'amim, outside countries, returns to the soil of Tumah, Tomei, soil that people walk on throughout the world in any country outside of Eretz Yisrael. So, this is the reason why the Arizal felt that it would be very advisable for himself to move to Eretz Yisrael, to actually settle and live there permanently. Then he considered this, and he reconsidered, and he decided that not only could he not go there to live, but he could not afford the time to go there to visit, to be there for one day or for one moment to walk the 4 steps. Arizal decided he could not go there at present because he was doing something that was so vitally important he could not spare the time. Arizal occupied himself now with the sacred task of getting the words of Rabbi Arizal printed. Rabbi Arizal's Sefer Likutei Maharan, his main Sefer, plus the Sefer Midas, which is known as Sefer Aleph Beis, Sipurei Mesias. Rabbi Arizal's Sforim were not yet that much spread. And as it is brought, the Levi said, the posek Yafutza Ma'yanesecha Chutza, that when the well of wisdom of the tzadik emes is spread throughout the world, that is what brings Mashiach closer. And therefore, the Arizal felt it was his duty to occupy his time solely with this most important of all tasks. Spread the Torah of Arizal to others, let others drink in his Torah, because by doing so, he could literally save the lives, the souls of those who would drink in these words. Just as today, people today, many who would have fallen, who would have gotten lost completely, come to a shir about Rabbi Arizal, open a sefer by Rabbi Arizal, open a Tikuney Zohar, and they have a deep feeling of tshuva. They return, they go back to the path of kedusha, the righteous path. Therefore, the Arizal felt that he would have to postpone any thoughts of going to Eretz Yisrael, no matter how important it was, because of the fact that he was doing something better by printing Rabbi Arizal's Sforim. Again, that sounds a little strange. Where does that decision come from? To feel that printing the Sefer, distributing Rabbi Arizal's words is more important than going to Eretz Yisrael, is there an origin for that? Now, as far as an origin is concerned, we can only say that if we have these words from our superiors, our teachers, our rabbis, that is sufficient. The Arizal said so, decided so, and certainly it is so. But we cannot add to this. We can only state as a side item that I experienced this question myself. Many years ago, when I first made my first trip to Eretz Yisrael, at that time I came to Rabbi Kochav Leib Zal's home. Rabbi Kochav Leib Zal was unquestionably Emunah Shleima, stating the fact he was the tzadik emes in this generation, just as Rabbi Nachman was in his time. Kochav Leib Zal was the greatest tzadik alive. I came to his home. Of course, it was the most thrilling experience possible, conceivable. And there, I felt the excitement of being in Eretz Yisrael, and I had the opportunity. So my first question was to Rabbi Kochav Leib Zal, isn't it advisable for me, now that I've seen Eretz Yisrael, I came, I saw, I should conquer for myself a piece of land, meaning an apartment, a home, and settle here just as so many Jews are living there then. Why should I stay out in the land of Tumah, America? It's a very colorful land, but why be there when I can be in the purity of Yerushalmi? It was a question that I really sought an answer for. Rabbi Kochav Leib Zal did not hesitate a moment. It was always his nature. He had the answer always ready immediately. And very firmly he replied. His answer was, if I could quote it practically verbatim, translating it, He said, know that Eretz Yisrael is Kodesh. It is holy. Every part of it is holy. Woe is to that person who speaks badly about any part of Eretz Yisrael. Everything about it, both the living and the inanimate, the earth, is holy. So, of course, to live in Eretz Yisrael, you are performing a deed that is constantly Kodesh. However, being outside of Eretz Yisrael and striving to bring close those people, those neshamas who are far from religion, who are far from the knowledge of the great light and the tzadik emes, to bring them close, and to feed them this information, to give them a new life, a new spirit, spiritually, that is Kodesh Kodeshim, holy of holies. Those were his words. Therefore he said, it is very good to live here, very important. But if you can be there in that distance, outside of Eretz and bring boys, young men, children, to the knowledge of Rabbi Nachman's writings, inspire them with the desire to follow Rabbi Nachman's advice and his teachings, that is more important, a much greater deed than living in Eretz Yisrael. And that was the decision which Baruch Hashem I followed for all these years, till the time comes, of course, when Be'ez Hashem, as every Jew does, to settle in Eretz Yisrael eventually. From here we can see, not that this is proof, of course, we can understand more the reason why the Nosson delayed his going to Eretz Yisrael, because he felt, he knew, decided he was doing something more important at the time, and that by doing this, he would eventually be zecher to get to Eretz Yisrael. Now, this went on for a period of close to 12 years. And the Nosson trip to Eretz Yisrael was approximately 12 years after Rabbi Nachman's passing. That's how long he spent before going to Eretz Yisrael. Of course, all that time, his mind and his actions were devoted to this mitzvah of spreading Rabbi Nachman's teachings, both in print, printing the Sfarim, and going out to spread the word himself. Rabbi Nachman was nostalgic in the year 5,571, and 9 years later, the year 5,580, Nosson then decided it was time to start thinking about going to Eretz Yisrael, to make concrete plans. He discussed this with a close friend of his, very close friend. His name was Rabbi Eliezer, and they decided to make a pact. They both traveled together in companionship to Eretz Yisrael. Nosson said that this is on a condition first. He told him that I must go to a city in Russia called Nikolaev, and there to try to raise money for printing. And we'll make that be the deciding factor. Let's go there first. If I receive a large sum of money which will help me to complete the printing, then I remain here. If I fail to raise that large sum of money, there's no sense in remaining here, and then we shall go to Eretz Yisrael. Of course, there are many times that a person makes plans. Not always do those plans culminate the way he wants them to. Nosson went to the city of Nikolaev. He tried his best to raise the necessary funds. He could not succeed in getting those funds. Despite this, he could not succeed either in getting himself to go to Eretz Yisrael, because no matter how he tried, no matter where he turned, he could not raise the necessary expenses. So he felt very sadly over the fact that he could not get to Eretz Yisrael yet. Afterwards, he traveled further. He was always traveling from city to city, helping to instill the fire of Rabbi Nachman into the hearts of those who would listen, and raising money both for the printing of Rabbi Nachman's Sfarim, and also for the maintaining the shul, the klois, in the city of Uman, where Rabbi Nachman's Tzion is. Rabbi Nachman's buried. Rabbi Nachman's Tzion is in the city of Uman. It's not far from Breslov. It is exactly equidistant in between the city of Kiev, the southernmost port of Russia, Odessa. Between these two is the city of Uman, where the Aharon Sion is located, and where the shul in which the Aharon's followers got together, especially for the Shoshana, and davened there. Also during the year, those who lived in Uman. Rav Nosson would go to that Sion mostly on Erev, the day before the Shchedesh, as Arizal advises, for certain months of the year, aside, of course, from the Shoshana itself, the most important time. So Rav Nosson now traveled to the city of Odessa. There he heard that Aharon's closest Talmud, who served him most closely, Reb Shimon Zal, we spoke about him during the life of Aharon, he was the very first Talmud of Aharon. And Rav Nosson Zal's closest friend, Rav Naftali Zal, he heard these two may be going to Eretz Yisrael. Of course, Reb Shimon Zal is buried in Eretz Yisrael, buried in Tzfas, just below the Tzion of the Aliyah Kodesh. He decided this was the time to go. He would go together with these two great tzaddikim, and he went so far as to actually give a deposit for a ticket on board a ship going to Istanbul. The first leg of the journey was Odessa to Istanbul. He gave this deposit, and then, as time went by, he was about to begin the journey. He had a change of heart. He felt that he was in the middle of doing certain things he could not leave, and so very reluctantly lost the deposit. He forfeited it. When the others left, he just sat there very despondently and cried. He actually cried to Hashem as to his sad lot. He had not succeeded in either one, and now he was left without this journey which could have culminated in his coming, realizing his primary wish in life, to be in Eretz Yisrael. So instead he turned and began to travel to the city of Uman, where he was supposed to be, Erev Chodesh Elul, the month of Teshuva. It was customary to get to the Tzion Erev Chodesh Elul. Nosson came there, and there on the Tzion he poured out his heart before the Aharon Sion, and he felt a little bit stronger after that. He felt assured that this was a temporary setback. He would be zecher to get to Eretz Yisrael eventually. In the year 5581, we see the reason for this delay. Because then Rav Nosson finally, after all this labor, all this self-sacrifice, he finally realized the biggest ambition of all. He was zecher to bring out and print the Sforim, the Kutei Maran, the Sefer Hamidas, and the Sefer Shemesh Tzadikim, which was improved later on, was filled in much more. But this was a schus that lasted for many generations. In fact, till Mashiach comes, this was the greatest schus possible. To this day, there is no question or doubt about it. We must state this openly. These words are being taped in heaven. We must state openly that we would not be sitting here at this moment learning about the Aharon if not for the fact that Nosson had completed this printing. So we today are fortunate in the schus of Nosson's works. Everyone owes Rav Nosson a very deep debt. And Ashreinu, that we're zecher to be among those who have that debt in our hands. Why we should become more in debt to achieve much more from Rav Nosson's words and a much greater tie bind with Aharon. 1 year later, 582, this was the year in which Rav Nosson realized his ambition. At that time, very appropriately it seems, very sadly but appropriately, a major war broke out when the Greeks rebelled against the Turkish Empire. The Greeks became very strong, and they began a major war against the Turks. Of course, this had many effects. In Eretz Yisrael, where the Turkish Empire was at its strongest, remember they held the city of Akko. Napoleon's forces had been repelled. They entrenched themselves much more so. So now this battle that kept going on, this was a battle that spilled out over into the sea, the naval forces, which meant that it was very dangerous for any boat to attempt going to Istanbul, or from there to Alexandria, or to Israel. So at this time, this was a media, an obstacle that rose up, seemed to block all possible desires to get to Eretz Yisrael. Despite this fact, Nosson decided to go to Uman, and there to pour out his heart in front of the Arizal Sion. He began to make this trip, and this was to get there Erev Chodesh Shvat. He decided to make this trip there, and just then a storm broke out. The storm was so serious, so severe, it was impossible for any wagons, any coaches to ride there. Nosson felt he must get to the Arizal Sion, so he bribed a coachman, offered him a very special high price to take him, and this was after dark, take him on these treacherous roads to get to the city of Uman. And of course, such a powerful desire must be blessed with success. He got to the Tzion Erev Chodesh Shvat, and there, this was Tov Kuf Pei Beis, 582. There he poured out his heart, and he felt that he must get there this year. Then he began to think about an additional point. He remembered that Arizal had traveled to Eretz Yisrael also at a time of major warfare, a time when the Napoleonic forces attacked the Turks. It was naturally very dangerous, practically impossible for a person to make this journey. Despite this seeming impossibility, Arizal did make the trip to Eretz Yisrael and returned. There were many adventures, many hazards. But he did return safely, and so, of course, he said to himself, he cannot compare to Arizal, but yet it is a sign, though, if Arizal was so great and would take these risks, and surely we who need this tikkun, who need this benefit so much more so, should surely take these risks. This was the thought that passed through his mind. He decided that he would not allow the war to stop him from making this trip. Short time later, Shabbos Shida, that's the Shabbos where they read the Kriyas Yamsuf, Parshas B'Shalach, he began to think too, and he read the Torah, when the posek says, Menachem Mendel Hashem did not take them along the short path to Eretz Yisrael. When he took them out of Egypt, he took them along a long path, very long path to get to Eretz Yisrael. So why take him along a long path? Very big kasha. Nosson says he thought it was kasha for a long time before he could find an answer to it. Hashem said he wouldn't take them because they would not have to see the enemy, there'd be warfare, they'd become frightened. Could there be fright, warfare, problems with Hashem leading them? Hashem could pave the road for them, could sink the enemy into the ground. What was the problem there? Why did Hashem have to take them out a roundabout way, a very long way, and get into even worse problems then, rather than take them directly to Eretz Yisrael? Nosson finally got to the answer when he stated emphatically that this is the case in all times, in all generations. In order for a person to realize the importance, the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, then heaven itself deliberately places obstacles in front of that person to make it more difficult. And the more difficult an item is, naturally, the more desire it creates within a person. You take something away from a person, he wants it still more. And so this is how they tease a person to making him desire it more and more. The more desire he has for it, the more sacrifices he'll make, the more effort he'll put into it, which will make the mitzvah so much more valuable. And this is the purpose that each person who goes there for kedusha has these medias, these obstacles set up before him, and that is to increase his desire. And this is a test for every single Jew. It is a test to see how much he will put out, how much he'll give of himself to fulfill his most important mission in life. That mission is to get to Eretz Yisrael, of course, for the sake of kedusha, to rise up higher and higher in Madrega, and that we get closer and closer to Hashem. So he felt that this is that important that he cannot afford to think about the war going on. Whatever risks have to be taken, he would gladly take. Then Nosson went to the city of Kremenchuk. These names undoubtedly sound unfamiliar to most people who are Americans. These are cities in Russia. Those people who lived in Russia recognize these names immediately. The word Kremenchuk is a small town, small city, would have no place on the map. But it does have very important connotations for the Breslover, and especially for us. Kremenchuk was the city of Rabbi Kochel Leibzel. That's the city where he was rabbi first, then in Uman, and of course then in Yerushalmi. At that time, in Kremenchuk, there lived two of Rabbeinu Zal's daughters. Rabbeinu Zal's daughters living there were Sarah and Chaya, and R Nosson received a request from Rabbeinu Zal's older daughter, Odel, to bring regards, a message to these two daughters. They've been traveling to this city. Those days it was difficult to travel by coach, and R Nosson felt that, he stated that since Rabbeinu Zal's Estalkus, he felt it a sacred duty to serve Rabbeinu Zal's daughters with the highest possible respect. And so no matter what sacrifice this entailed, he would bring this regards to Kremenchuk, to Rabbeinu Zal's daughters. When he came there, he heard a story that pleased him. He felt the trip was really worth it. Heard a story about a very wealthy man who had approached Rabbeinu Zal before Rabbeinu Zal made the trip to Eretz Yisrael. This wealthy man said to Rabbeinu Zal, "You're going to Eretz Yisrael, please take me along with you. If you take me with you, then I'll go to Eretz Yisrael. If not, I won't. No, it's up to you." Rabbeinu Zal said to the man, "Why do you want me to take you with me? Why only me to take you? Why can't you go yourself?" The man said, "Well, that's the way I want to go. Myself, I won't go. If you take me, then I'll be good enough to go." Rabbeinu Zal turned to his Talmidim and cried out, "This is not the way to get to Eretz Yisrael. You do not make conditions. You don't make stipulations. I'll go if you do this, if I get that. The way to go is why Hashem said to Avraham Avinu. Hashem said, Lech lecha. Lech lecha means go. How? How go? Go on foot. Walk. A person should walk and should crawl to Eretz Yisrael. If you cannot get transportation, then walk and crawl there. Could a person walk from America to Eretz Yisrael? Well, it would be about the same question as asking, could a person walk from Russia to Eretz Yisrael? The trip takes by boat, round trip close to a year, or over land, on land by mule, take more than a year. How does a person walk to Eretz Yisrael? Now Hashem said to Avraham, if you feel the value of the land, you'd be willing to walk if you cannot get transportation. That sounds strange or impossible. And of course you would say, well, so many thousands of years ago, there were different people then, right? Wrong. You have the same type of people today. Same 248 organs, the same mind, the same heart. It's up to the way you employ, the way you use your faculties, the facilities that you're blessed with. We have today one Breslov and Yerushalmi. Most of those who have been there know him, of Tzviaya Lippel. Tzviaya was one of the closest Talmidim of Rabbi Kochel Leibzel. Many years ago, he was in Uman and spent years there. Every night he spent time to Rabbeinu Zal Siyan for hours. Every night for hours, pouring out his heart, begging Rabbeinu Zal Shmitzach to get there to Yisrael. That was his fond hope. Rabbeinu Zal said, get there. He said, help me to get there. Finally, he decided that the way to get there is only by overcoming all obstacles, the hard way, which means, lech lecha, go by foot. This is not a fiction story. This is not a tale of thousands of years ago. This is a tale that happened now, in our time. Tzviaya decided to go by foot, and this meant going through alien territory, going through Mongolia, Manchuria. You don't speak Chinese, you barely speak anything. And you go alone among these subhuman characters and on treacherous roads, places where a person can get lost forever. He decided it was worth it. He would do it. He did it. It took him 9 years' time. He walked from Uman to Eretz Yisrael, practically the entire way on foot. He made it. He went through all these different lands, different countries. Many times that he was sentenced to death, caught by these carnivorous humans, cannibals, And there were stories that could not be put in print because the publishers of fiction would throw it out as being too far-fetched. That this was a true story of an experience of one today. Not thousands of years ago, but today. This is what Rabbi Arizal said then. You want to get to Eretz Yisrael, you have to be willing, if necessary, to walk to Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, of course, this rich man did not succeed in persuading Rabbi Arizal to take him. Rabbi Arizal felt this story were the most consoling words he had heard, because this strengthened him, gave him new strength, new desire, new courage to break through every possible obstacle and to fulfill his ambition. After Purim, Arizal again went to Odessa. Odessa is the jumping off point. It's the port, southern part of Russia. And from there, one gets a boat to Istanbul, Turkey, thence across the Mediterranean Sea. He came to Odessa, and there he wrote a note to his friend Yehuda Eliezer to come and meet him in Odessa. That this time they would leave for Eretz Yisrael. This was immediately after Purim, and he saw then that he was having difficulties again, and realized he could not leave before Pesach. You have to stay over Pesach in Odessa. He was staying so many weeks in a strange city, but he was willing because of the final point, the final fulfillment of his ambition. He stayed there and continually waited for word from his friend Yehuda Eliezer. Now, Erev Pesach, Arizal was lying down. Suddenly he heard a shout. He got up and he saw Yehuda Eliezer come. His friend had arrived. This was such a simcha to him. He leaped up and he kissed him. The friendship was so strong, and it manifested itself. He displayed it by kissing his friend. Arizal jumped up and kissed Yehuda Eliezer. Of course, this is a definite sign. Now, it may sound strange in a way. Of course, they havdil, you have that among goyim. The certain European customs where this is done among friends or relatives, but here it's done with much more kedusha, because this represents the Shechina Ubala, the Chibuk, Nishuk, Yichud, and holiness. We find too that Rabbi Arizal wrote about the fact that when they were with Rabbi Arizal, then when they would depart, they would kiss Rabbi Arizal's hand. That's not an exceptional case, of course. We know that even today too, the Hasidic Rebbes, many of them, have the custom that when they give a bracha, the Chassid would kiss their hands. This is Hasidic Rebbes. You have regular rabbis, not rabbis, chachams, among the Sfardim, where this is very prevalent, very customary. Of course, what this all refers back to is there is a definite yesod, a reason for this. And Arizal states clearly that if a person wants to have the bracha of a tzadik come true, when the tzadik gives him a bracha, he said, kiss the tzadik's hand, the bracha will be fulfilled. And of course, this is not practiced much today, very frankly, because we do not really know of tzaddikim today. Of course, here we don't know of any. In Yerushalmi, we have one where we say that a person who gets a bracha from the tzaddik emes today, in Yerushalmi, kisses his hand, is very fortunate. Very big zechiyah to do that, because it's a difficult thing to do. The tzaddik emes does not allow you to do it. If you can sneak it in quickly, you've got it made. But this is why we can understand that there is a very deep kedusha for this. And this kedusha we can see too at a moment of simcha. Arizal says that when does a person reach the highest point of kedusha, not when he's crying, when he's sad, but when he's at the highest point of simcha, you get to the highest point of kedusha. And therefore, at a wedding, when people are very gilufim, very elated, very happy frame of mind, it is customary a deep happiness, a deep affection for the friends of the chassid to kiss the chassid. Some people look at this askance, as though it's a strange, an unusual type of act. In reality, it is usual for others to do it, but not for the case of yeshiva persons, people of kedusha. This has a very important meaning behind it. So Rabbi Arizal was very happy with Yehuda Eliezer, they both stayed together for Pesach. And Arizal writes that on Shvi Shel Pesach, the seventh day of Pesach, when we celebrate the division of the waters of the Red Sea, they daven Vasikin. This is an important note for us, because here we have definite proof, as it is written elsewhere, that the custom, our custom, following the writings of the Baal Shem Tov and the Anshe Shlomeinu, that on Shvi Shel Pesach, it's one special day when a person should not allow himself to miss that minyan of Vasikin. Baruch Hashem, a person can daven Vasikin every day, of course, is naturally a blessing. But that is a day to remember. The day of Kriyas Yom Suf, the Ashmedes, when the dividing the waters took place, a person should then be davening Vasikin, which is one of the greatest zechuyos a person can get in davening. But we also wanted to pursue further this topic, the question about the advisability of leaving for Eretz Yisrael immediately. So he went to see a very wealthy person who knew a lot about what was going on there. He came to this wealthy person's home with a desire to hear something good about Eretz Yisrael, as any person would. This rich man was lying there, reclining, began to speak with words of evil, not against Eretz Yisrael exactly, but against the idea of traveling there. He said that the Greeks then were very powerful, they were very dangerous. The war had reached a peak where any person who would attempt to cross the sea then would truly be destroyed, and that it was definitely, he stressed this, was definitely impossible for any person then to attempt the crossing of the water to get to Eretz Yisrael, because even there too there was danger. The Greeks would attack Israel. Arizal looked at this man. He saw that this man was not really human. He was a human person, but in him there spoke through him the Satan himself. He needed an exorcist. He had the Satan himself in him, and of course the Satan would do this, trying to dissuade the Arizal from going. Satan knew that this was the biggest kedusha that could be reached in that generation. Arizal getting to so. Arizal fled this person's house, refused to entertain any thoughts about what this man had said. Then he went directly to the port, to the agent, and paid for 2 places, the cabin on board the ship going to Istanbul, first leg of the journey. This ship was a ship with, they'd be the only Jews on board, all Goyim on that ship. And of course, this meant that there would be danger too, because the Goyim generally, if they have Jews alone on board with them, they might do something harmful to the Jews. Arizal did not pause to think about what this entailed, as to whether it was safe or not. He felt only that the journey was worth any type of sacrifice necessary. To get this done, of course, there was a lot of difficulty, because around the port section, you have ships of all different nations. So a person who does not understand the languages could not speak to any of these sailors or seamen around. Arizal states too, this is an interesting point, that he could not even speak Russian fluently. He spoke it weakly. And that's why today people marvel at how some people living in Williamsburg, going to yeshivas there, speak a very poor English. They were born and raised in Brooklyn. The English is very poor, like foreigners. The answer is they do not bother with a language that is not holy. They speak Hebrew or Yiddish, or whatever language is holy in their land, Hungarian, or Sephardic, Syrian. They do not care for the language that's strange to them, and we see proof of this that the Arizal, who lived in Russia all his life, could speak Russian, but not fluently at all. We'll see this later in his dealings, negotiations with the ship's captain. The rest of the story, of course, becomes much more exciting as we go into the actual trip. We'll continue this story in Mitzvah Hashem subsequently, the next shir. Again, the purpose of the story is, the moral is to teach us that since these great tzaddikim made such sacrifice to get that Eretz Yisrael, surely we should bend every effort and not allow ourselves to miss that opportunity, to be zecher, to get that Yisrael, to drink of its waters, to breathe of its air, to walk on its soil, and to receive the kedusha that one can attain there. We should be zecher to all get there, eventually, shortly, to get there, together with the entire Klal Yisrael, B'kibbutz Goliath, the coming of Mashiach, to see with our eyes the Binyan Beis HaMikdash, Shemheda, Amen, Amen.